We are recording.
Check, check.
Doyle, take one.
All right,
Doyle, take two.
take two.
So
Take five.
I'm going to ask you again, whose idea was this?
It was a collaborative conclusion based on a conversation.
And based on the fact that you're going away.
I am going away. Not that far.
It's far. I've looked at the map.
All right,
Yeah.
so what do you want to know?
First, I just want to say I'm going to miss you
Okay.
terribly.
Well, you know, we could see each other once every 2 or 3 months now, so.
Low expectations.
I don't know. It's yeah, I'm leaving here and I'm going someplace else. And for a while it was rather ambiguous as to what I was going to do when I got there.
So you're going home. So.
I'm going home, yes. I'm going to Aiken, Minnesota, which is a town at the intersection of three highways. One crossing Minnesota from east to west, from Duluth to Fargo. One going from the Iowa border through Minneapolis all the way up to International Falls. And then another state highway that sort of terminates right there. It's on the Mississippi River. And it's within miles of where my mother was born, my father was born, and my mother's father grew up. So it's home.
Yeah. What do you think's going to happen when you go there?
I don't know. I have no idea. I'm going to. At first, I was, as a way to sort of establish myself there again, I was going to do like a series of road trips following those highways and photographing along those roads, the landscape and the places and the people. And since this idea has sort of like really solidified, my sister had gotten my father's file from the orphanage that he grew up in. 200 and some pages of documentation of his 15 years of life in the school.
Wow.
And I've been going through that, and I think I'm going to work on a script based on that material and sort of somehow pair that with landscape between the school in southern Minnesota and his birthplace in northern Minnesota.
Did you so you haven't read this yet, the file yet?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you have?
I've been going through it for the last month.
What kind of things are in it?
It's very dry intake form when he was 4 years old, you know why he was there, the court documents, relative to his parents' divorce and abandonment, and
So he was abandoned?
pretty much.
Oh.
Initially abandoned and then taken by the state out of his mother's house because it was not conducive to the survival of children.
Oh, dear. Wait a minute, this is your father.
My father. Yes.
Okay, not your grandfather. Wow.
So I'm going to take that and I'm going to work on some sort of a script structure and pair that with the landscape, the place, or a combination of the landscape and the place, which I think are different things. There's something about a place that exists in a landscape, and so I just feel that they're different.
Yeah. The trees that you planted,
Mm-hmm.
I keep thinking about them because I planted a tree, a few, in my backyard, and what a connection that is.
Mm-hmm.
And if I were you, I'd go live in those trees.
Well, that's where I stayed 2 summers ago when
Yeah.
I went back there. I stayed at that cabin on that land where we planted those trees when I was 10 years old. Yeah, and they're 60, 70 feet high now.
That's incredible.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting because the original idea was this was going to be a Christmas tree farm, and my uncle was going to make money on these things. So, and then once he realized he had like 30 acres of spruce and pine, and that was a lot of work to cut, he said, "The hell with this, and we're just going to reforest." Now it's a reforestation project.
Yeah. It's even better.
Yeah. So actually, watching what happens to that, now the hardwoods are starting to grow up in that grove of fir trees.
So do they push out the pine trees or?
Well, the pine trees will die out, because there's a lot of light that comes in. So that now the hardwood, broadleaf, the oaks and stuff like that can sort of, move in gradually. But that was starting to happen when I was back there.
So when I asked before, what do you think is going to happen when you go there emotionally?
Oh, hell, I don't know. I mean, that's something you look at after the fact, right?
Yeah, but I don't know.
I mean, you can't anticipate those things.
Well, aren't you anticipating the feeling like you're going to be home?
Well, I know how I felt when I was there 2 years ago, and I felt like I belonged there.
Yeah. I just think it's amazing that you would make that kind of change at this time in life.
Well, old elephants go home and die in the. Didn't you ever watch those old Tarzan movies?
No. Wasn't my culture.
No, I think it's an. I don't know. There's something comforting about the place. I mean, I grew up there. I grew up in those woods. That's where we spent weekends, and that's where I learned to hunt and, walking through the woods with my grandfather.
Yeah. Wait a minute. Your grandfather was your mother's.
My mother's father.
Yeah, I get
Yeah,
that
when
confused.
when I speak of my grandparents, it's just two of them. I didn't have four grandparents. So, just to sort of get the nomenclature down, I guess.
Keith said you're going to do a film.
Yeah, that's what this thing with my dad will be.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know. You have to make new friends.
Well, I have old friends that are there. People I went to school with.
That are still there.
Yeah.
Oh.
In Minneapolis, yeah. That's just 2 hours. 2 hours south. And my sister is 2 hours north.
And I'm thinking, here you're 1 hour south of Rochester. You don't get in very often.
No,
Maybe you don't need to.
I don't know. I mean, it's. I'm just looking forward to starting from a fresh slate. Let's say. I think that's an interesting thing to do. Occasionally.
Well, I don't know.
You don't know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's an art community,
Mm-hmm.
but not where you're going to be living.
Well, it's. I've been trying to figure that out too. Minnesota's divided up into 5 regions as far as the arts are concerned, and each has an arts council, and they're funded. I would assume they're funded like based on population and that kind of stuff. There are statewide grants, there are regional grants, there are gallery. I mean, the little Aiken itself has its own little arts council. They have a performing arts center that basically serves central Minnesota with concerts and theater. it seems to be rather, I mean, it might not necessarily be what I would personally be interested in, but it seems to be a rather healthy arts environment there. And then in the city, in Minneapolis and St. Paul, it's, there's numbers of museums. There's actually a museum in Duluth. I haven't really looked into what's available in Fargo, but Fargo's an hour and a half west.
Yeah, but they put people in tree grinders there.
Well, you gotta fertilize the.
Well, how long have you been in Rochester?
40 years.
40 years?
Mhm.
Oh, man.
1984.
Oh, so I guess I've been here longer than you. Still seems like a long time.
Yeah, it was February 1st, 1984, when I arrived at the Rochester airport.
What are you going to miss from here? Chill.
What am I gonna miss?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know.
Come on.
I think what I'm hoping for is to break a routine and sort of reinvent. I think that's what I'm looking forward to.
So you feel like you're in a routine here that you're not satisfied with?
When I left Minneapolis, I felt like it was a dead end. I was in a dead end position. Where I was working, I had gone as far as I was going to go within that organization, and the only way to make a step would be to, go on to graduate school someplace, to make a major change. And I had applied to UCLA and was talking with some guy about going to the Himalayas to work on a film, and I had also was talking to Nathan and Arthur Sushia about coming to Rochester. And with those various options, what happened was Rochester materialized. I got a call from Nathan. He said, "I want you to come out and run the media center." So that was that. There wasn't anything else for me to do with Minneapolis at that point.
Yeah.
And I think, to some extent, it's the same sort of thing here now. I've pretty much done what I'm going to do here. And, I think every 40 years you should have a new life.
So what have you done here?
What have I done here?
Yeah, that's a big question, I know.
Yeah, I
But-
don't know.
On all levels, what have you done here?
No, I don't know. You'll have to ask. You'll have to ask around. Karen can tell you. Where'd Karen go?
Drag me into this property?
Yeah, why
Yeah.
not? Yeah, come and sit with me and talk. Karen is a valuable resource to Perry. She has been involved in the startup of numerous small operations here in town. So, yeah. I take pictures. I think that's what I do. I wander around and I take pictures.
You connect people,
I connect people. Yeah.
create community.
Okay. I try to have fun and try to make sure other people are somehow benefiting from my presence as opposed to suffering from my presence.
Yeah.
So,
When I think about leaving here, I have trouble with the idea of leaving a community where people have known me so long and the kind of comfort that I get in that.
mhm.
And so I project that onto you, but you
Mhm.
may not be experiencing that.
No, I don't think so. I think I think to a great extent, I don't feel like I don't have a companion, which, being here is difficult. There's no You know, I mean, the community here is one thing, but the, I think the level of intimacy is something that I miss. You know, just who can you call at 10 o'clock at night who's not going to hang up on you? That kind of thing. And not that that's a reason to leave, but that's, you know, sort of where I'm at. There's, I think the community that's here, interesting on a lot of levels, but I don't know how fulfilling it is for me as an individual.
Are you talking about just the Perry community or the whole
Yeah,
Rochester community?
I'm talking about being here in rural upstate New York, in a small town without, and I also know that I don't want to live in a city. I mean, I know that. I don't want to deal with that. But, you know, when I spend a week or something up in Rochester, and especially in the winter, the traffic sucks. There's no place to park. You can't walk on the sidewalks because nobody shovels. And it's like, you know, it just goes on and on and on and on.
Yeah, but you're there as a guest then in somebody else's house. If you were in your own house, you'd be holding up and making prints and
I don't
taking
know.
pictures out your window. And
I don't know what I'd be doing.
but it is different being a guest there but then being restricted from going out.
Well, yeah, I don't know. It's too confusing.
I guess I'm still trying to like argue you out of.
Out of leaving? No, that's not going to happen.
I know it's not going to happen.
You know, that's inevitable. So let's just move on.
Okay.
Um,
But
No, I'm actually looking forward to working on this film project about my dad. I think that there's going to be a lot of there'll be a lot of things that I will learn, probably about myself more than anything. I think that just trying to reconstruct that world then and try to understand the circumstance. You know, on the surface, it looks like his mother was a terrible person, but there has to be some reasons for the way she acted. And those are some things that I'm sort of interested in trying to figure out.
yeah,
You know, we're talking about the end when his parents were married. This is right after his father was a World War I veteran. It's right after the war, right after the Spanish flu pandemic. You know, I mean, rural Minnesota at that point was, you know, 15 years out of the Indian Wars, you know, up there. I mean, we're talking about they were going on until the 1880s. You know, and his father was born in 1890. So it's like, this is the frontier. This is where these
Yeah.
people were, you know, 1900 to 1920. My dad was born in 28. And you know, it's like you think, you know, what was going on in the rest of the world? You know, you've got Dada in Europe, and that sort of nihilistic, you know, the world is falling apart.
yeah.
You know, so what's going on in the heads of these people? This 19-year-old girl and 27-year-old man, that was their ages, and she was pregnant with somebody else's child when they got married.
Who was that?
He was dead. Somehow he someplace along the line he died.
Oh.
You know, so like what's the whole dynamic there? And those are the little stories that I'm trying to, I guess, construct in my head and figure out. You know, and I'll never know because anybody who was there is long gone now.
Yeah.
But trying to come up with some sort of context for what was going on and why they did what they did, and then how my father survived and turned into the person that he was. You know, so there's like all of that. as I was growing up, I was very angry with him. He drank a lot, and I mean, he was never abusive, but he just wasn't there, or he wasn't able to be who you might want your father to be.
So he was basically out on his own when he was 15 or something, or older.
Actually, the school he was in was incredibly supportive, and they took care of him in a way. He had an older brother, a couple of years older, and a sister that was a couple more years older, and they went into the school in 1933. A year later, the three of them were placed back with their mother, and they lived with her for like 3.5 or 4 years. And then the state took them out of that home, put them back in the school. His brother and sister went into foster homes, and my dad stayed in the school until he was 16 and could get an apartment off campus. But he still chose to stay there and finish high school. So he obviously felt very secure and safe there, and they were very supportive. I have the the records of the caseworkers helping him find jobs for the summer and an apartment in Minneapolis for the summer, and checking up on him throughout the summer, and all the notes for all of that stuff was there. So they were very, very caring and supportive. And I was quite impressed with the level of with the level of involvement that they had with this kid.
But yet he ended up, was he an alcoholic?
Well, he drank a lot, but he was never late for work the next morning.
So what were you angry at him about?
Well, that, not understanding, like, why did, I had no idea why. A lot of this stuff, I mean, I knew he grew up in an orphanage, but I didn't know anything about the rest of this. Nothing. So, like, who am I? I'm a 15, 16, 17-year-old kid, and I'm pissed off at the world, and my dad happens to be, occasionally annoying. So, right? I mean, what happens? You friction. So coming back into this, and going through this paperwork and gaining some insight into the world that he was, that was his life, that was his world. Again, gives me some context that I can better understand his reasons for doing and acting the way he did. And then putting it all together, I've come to really consider his situation as being incredibly heroic. To have survived it and raised 5 kids without, without a great deal of insanity. I mean, 5 kids is a job anyway, let alone growing up, in the context that he grew up in. So.
You want to take it for it? No, don't stop recording. We'll keep it as one. Okay, take 2.
Bob Doyle, take 2.
Okay, what were we talking about?
Well, you were talking about you're gaining a different understanding of your father. Do you know about? Have you heard about or read about generational trauma? I haven't read anything about it. I guess I've heard it and recognize it as something.
Yeah. I was doing some of that reading before I went back. As my mother's dementia sort of developed and expanded, I started thinking or trying to read about how the mind and memory work, and some of that sort of led me to the idea of generational memory that isn't based on story, but is somehow, maybe genetic, passed on through DNA or something. And there's a lot of discussion about Holocaust survivors and their children and grandchildren.
Right.
And I think that there's something to that. I mean, yeah, I think they've, I couldn't quote the literature, but from what I've read, there seems to have been documentation of how that has affected DNA. So that's been sort of in the back of my head too. You know, this sort of, you know, like what happened to him, and you know, to my mother as well. You know, and then that combination of circumstance somehow then has set up the situation for me and my brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
Um,
Thinking about your father's father,
mhm.
and I've been reading fiction books because that's where I get my info from, about World War I, and the effects on soldiers as well as people who in Europe, but the effect on soldiers and the gas that was used, the kinds of warfare that it was. I don't get a lot of. I haven't ever had any information about that before, and so I think about your grandfather coming back from being in the war, and what he's dealt with. He's 27 when he gets together, and with your grandma, and he's a kid. Basically, he's a kid.
Yeah.
And that, you know, so starting with that as a starting point, and coming then down to your father, who ends up being in an orphanage, and then you and your siblings, that there's a lot there.
Yeah, yeah. And another thing that I've been thinking about is the effect of the place and and how that affects the people, and the fact that there's, you know, multiple generations of people that I'm connected to this place, this location. There's something there that I'm sort of interested in thinking about, or whatever. Years ago, I was reading a book by Isaac Asimov, the science fiction guy, and it was actually a history of the Bible and all of the text and the source material that was gathered together to create this, you know, book, this huge, you know, and some of the original things that were dropped out, depending upon who was editing, you know, all that. So it's a pretty interesting book. It's about like that. What was that? Who's that? Okay. All right. Take 3. But in that book, he talks about the spirit of the place, the gods that exist in places. And wherever it is that you are, your home, where you're born, there are spirits or gods that you have to pay some acknowledgement to, or respect to, or whatever. So when you travel, you should always scoop up a bit of earth to bring with you, so that your gods are with you. And when you go someplace else, you're obligated to pay respect and worship the gods of that place. You know, so it's like no one's better than anybody else. And I always thought that was an interesting way to approach, you know, your place.
Okay. So you would bring dirt from Rochester back to Minnesota?
Or probably from Minnesota to Rochester initially. You know, it's like, because that's where I'm from, is from Minnesota.
It was on the bottom of your shoes.
Anyway, the idea was you put it in a little pouch and a little sack, and you carry it with you. So you always have your home with you when you're going places. And when you are someplace else, you still have to pay some acknowledgement and respect to the place you're at.
And how do you do that?
I don't know. My point is, I think it was that the importance of place, and how that place is carried through from one generation to the next, and the fact that my grandfather, my father's father, he was born in South Dakota in 1880 or 97 or something like that. My grandmother was born in Iowa. His mother was born in Iowa. On my mother's side, her father was born just south of Aiken, closer to Cambridge, which is closer to the cities. And my grandmother was born way down south near the Iowa border in the prairie. My great-grandfather on my mother's side was a cook in the lumber camps right there around Aiken in north central Minnesota in the 1860s, 70s, 80s. You know, so this has been, you know, it's sort of an interesting place for, you know, all these people somehow came together in this place, and I'm the result of that. So I think there's some dynamic there that they came to this place, and out of that came my father and then myself. So I don't know if any of that makes sense or if it's true.
No, it
You know,
makes, it
but
makes
that's sort of one of the things that is in my head as I'm approaching making this film.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. I thought about that. People, like, I don't have that in my history because of everybody moving around.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my father's father was from Russia, and so then my father's from Brooklyn. My mother's from a mixture of all kinds of people and lived in Illinois, and then we were in New York City, in North Carolina or Colorado, and you know, moved all around. So there's no place that has that sense that you would have.
Right.
Or people, I know there are people in Rochester who their families all, you know, it's many generations who've lived here. I don't have that kind of connection.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think that's something that exists here because there are roads named after families, you know, and that might be part of my discomfort being here, is that this is an incredibly established community in a way, and I'm not part of it. You know, I'm sort of peripheral to it, incidental. You know, a recent transplant.
40 years later.
Well, yeah, exactly. There is no road, you know, named after my family here.
I don't know if you didn't know Julie and Judd Williams. They were artists. Anyway, there's a street off of West Henrietta Road called Furlong, and that was Julie's grandparents' farm, and their name was Furlong, and so that's that kind of thing.
Yeah, I had dinner with friends last night whose the house, her grandparents were born in the house that she owns now.
Wow.
You know,
Who's that?
we're in Warsaw. You know, you wouldn't know.
I don't know them.
No, but you know, so that's I don't know. I mean, this is just these are the things that keep my mind going and make me want to do something, I guess.
I'm sorry, but John Denver's song is running through my head. Country road.
No.
Sorry.
It's okay.
But I do believe that the sort of land memory and I do believe in that. I mean, I have a connection to North Carolina and the smell of pine trees, and that's a very strong connection. But I was a kid there, so it's a primary primary memory.
Right.
But yeah.
So what else?
Mhm.